Comparing martial arts styles is like comparing the value of tools. I'll tell you what I mean in a second. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, this is Sensei Anthony with the Real Karate Podcast, where we talk about all things martial arts, training, and overall we just try to get to know each other and have some decent discussion about this thing that we love, martial arts. So, anybody who knows me knows I get irritated when people talk about what's the best style. To me, it's like having a box full of tools and asking what's the best tool. A screwdriver is excellent for unscrewing and screwing in tools. But if you have nuts and bolts that need dealing with, I'd rather have pliers or a wrench. One is not better than the other, one just fits the situation better. When people say to me, what art works better in the fight, the first thing I do is think about, well, how do you train? Because in my experience, anybody who trains in a practical and realistic manner, they tend to come to the same conclusions, and that's regardless of the art. Matter of fact, in the old days, the idea of mixing arts was quite common, okay? You had complete arts that were broken up into subsections later based on preference and other factors. So when I foot sweep people and they tell me that I'm trying to do judo, I remind them that karate has tegumi, indigenous wrestling, as a part, as a base of the program in Okinawa. So it's not about trying to bring about anything that's new that hasn't been done in the past, but it's just a matter of addressing realism and practicality, okay? So let's say we're in a room and a melee breaks out. What I do not want to do is tackle someone and take them to the floor like you might see in wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just because the likelihood of you being stepped on or your lack of control in that environment may be not optimal for that strategy. Now, that's just one scenario. Let's say you're an excellent boxer, but you find yourself being accosted by somebody with a knife. You definitely, in my opinion, do not want to engage that person with short and medium range attacks like punches. I would, if I had to do anything at that point, I would try to kick that person as hard as I could with a side kick or a front kick and run for my life, okay? And this is just common sense, right? So when people talk about, well, what style is better? What they're really trying to do is get something that's called confirmation bias. They're trying to get proof that what they do is best. And that's basically what marketing is. For you young kids out there, you don't know that the Gracie family didn't tell people that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was the best. They said that 95% of all confrontations, which wasn't true, they got that statistic from law enforcement, where the focus is on controlling people on the ground. They told everyone that 95% of all real fights end up in a clinch, that you can control that clinch, take the fight to the ground, and employ your grappling techniques. Matter of fact, back then, they didn't even say give up your art and take jiu-jitsu. They said you should add Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to your training, right? But now it's become something along the lines of, you don't know jiu-jitsu, you don't know how to fight, right? In the 70s and before, the most prestigious title in combat sports was the heavyweight boxing champion. He was seen as the pinnacle of combat sport efficacy. And for good reason. When you see someone that size throwing punches and knocking people out, it tends to sink into the minds of people, especially in an American culture where boxing is largely considered fighting, right? If you are a wrestler, you may understand the value of being able to pick someone up and slam them or pick them up and throw them. But the thing about wrestling is, and it's similar with a lot of other grappling styles, is it always takes both hands to execute. It takes full control of a person, which usually, I think almost every case, requires both hands to do. In a situation where you're maybe surrounded or someone produces a weapon, maybe that's not what you want to do, right? The point of all this is every scenario has variety. And that variety can definitely make you consider, or should make you consider, how you choose to proceed with either your attack or your escape. And let's not forget, escaping is the number one plan. So talking about style differences is childish, and people do it, but we're here, so let's just continue to work our way through this. For all of you excellent kickers, low, high, all this kind of stuff, can you do that with jeans on? Can you do it with your cell phone in your pocket? With your phone and your keys? Can you do it if you're wearing heels? Can you do it barefoot on the ground? Can you do this with clothes that are relatively limiting? Just a thought, not a criticism. If you are a wrestler, do you think that dropping your knee to the ground, a freestyle wrestler, dropping your knee to the ground as you push through that double leg, do you think that's the best idea on concrete? I would say no, because I know someone who cracked their kneecap doing just that in a real fight. Habit took over, fight instincts took over, they shot a double leg on concrete and cracked their patella. Something to consider. For you excellent punchers out there, do you think that mixing it up, like I said, with a group of people is the best idea if they're armed with blunt or edged weapons, right? Or if you have unsure footing, maybe you're fighting on wet grass. Maybe your first idea should be to get to a more secure setting before you even think about throwing punches. These are all things to consider, right? Wrenches are not better than crowbars, which are not better than screwdrivers. They are all a collective part of a tool set. And anyone who is a fan of realistic self-defense, they should be considering the value of, if not specializing in multiple arts, at least having reasonable grasp of certain skill sets. Now, let me tell you what I mean. I'm not a good wrestler in the freestyle Greco-Roman folk style sense. But because I have a striker's timing, I know how to get inside someone's guard and then make my takedowns more effective. So am I going to go tackle some D1 wrestler? Absolutely not. But after throwing 5 or 6 punches and a kick, can I get to where I need to be to employ some of Karate's takedowns that work vastly, that work very differently than a wrestler's takedowns? Yes. If you are an excellent kicker, throwing a roundhouse kick to the head is a possibility, but if you can mix that skill with a roundhouse kick and then solid punching, then you've got a pretty good control of long, mid, and and close range attacks, right? These are all things to consider. This does not devalue your art. It doesn't make what you do now less effective. If your goal is to be able to protect yourself, then look for realism wherever you can find it. Look for practical training and practical drills wherever you can find it, because that will be the difference between being grounded in reality and likely more able to protect yourself, or not being grounded in reality and finding yourself the victim of grievous harm, maybe worse. So stop talking about styles. These are all tools that we can put in our toolbox, and we would be wise to use as many tools that we can learn. I hope that helps. Train hard, stay safe, and the most important thing always is to please be kind to yourselves and each other. I'll see you next time.